Hi everyone, welcome to Lola's Frugal Life. This is episode number 162, and today we're going to be talking about getting out of debt and staying out of debt. So please stick around for a few quick words from our sponsor and we'll get right into the show. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. If there is something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals, BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating in under 48 hours. It's not a crisis line, it's not self-help, it's professional counseling done securely online. There is a broad range of expertise available, which may not be available to you locally. The service is available for clients worldwide. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your counselor. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions so you won't ever have to sit in an uncomfortable waiting room as with traditional therapy. BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if needed. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit betterhelp.com/Lola, that's better H-E-L-P, and join the over 1 million people who have taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and Lola's Frugal Life listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/Lola. So this week, I wanted to talk about some tips that might help you if you're trying to get out of debt. But even more importantly, whether you're in debt or not, I also want to talk about some tips for staying out of debt, because there's no point in trying to get out of debt and coming up with a great plan if you're going to end up back in the same place. So I think that one of the most important parts of a debt-free plan is to figure out how you're going to not get into debt in the future, because you don't want to do all this work to get yourself out of debt and then wind up right back where you started again. So we could just start talking about some tips for getting out of debt first. I think everybody who listens to podcasts or YouTube videos or reads books about getting out of debt, one of the first things you always hear is determine your why. And I'm sure you've heard this before, but the reason it's talked about is because it really is important, and it really does help you with sticking to your goals long term. When you're trying to get out of debt or establish other financial goals, by having that reason behind why you want to do this, it really helps drive you and motivate you to stick to your plans. Some examples of some things, maybe why you might want to get out of debt, could be to simplify your life and reduce stress. Maybe you want to just have more income available to do with what you choose. Maybe you want to increase your savings. Maybe you want to do some charitable giving. Maybe you want to travel. You can have more freedom in your career choices. There's many different reasons why people get out of debt, but knowing that reason and keeping that in your mind and kind of seeing that that you can get to that once you get out of debt can really help you stick to your plans. So the first thing you want to do when you're trying to get out of debt is make a list of all your debt, because you really need to see the big picture, what you currently owe, who you owe it to, what is the interest rate, what's your current monthly minimum payment. If you're unsure what you owe on any particular debts, maybe like a car loan or a student loan that might not send you a statement with the balance, just list out what you do know for now, and then fill in the details as you can get them. Maybe you might need to make some phone calls or look through some paperwork, but you really need to have a list to show you the full picture, and before you can put together a plan so that you can see what it is that you're trying to tackle. So you need to then create a budget so that you can see what money that you have available to put towards this debt. So if you don't have a budget already, not the first step to getting out of debt, I just said the first step was listing your debt, but one of the most important things in order to be able to get out of debt is to have a budget, because if you don't have a budget and you don't know where your money's going, it's going to be very difficult to determine how much money you have, if any, to put towards debt. You might need to look at a budget and revise your expenses and cut back where you can so that you can put money towards your debt. I do have a separate episode on creating a basic budget, I forget what it's called, but it's something like Budget Basics or something like that. If you need to kind of think through the process of setting up a budget. But I mean, basically the first step is really just tracking your expenses. So if you're not already tracking your expenses, you're likely to find some opportunities in there where you might be spending more on things than you thought you were, that you might be able to put towards debt. So once you have a plan put together, you have your budget, and you know how much money you have that you can put towards debt, it's usually going to happen quicker. You're usually going to wind up getting more money towards debt than you have even identified, because the more focused you are on this and the more you're watching those expenses, the more you'll find little areas where you can pull from. And the more motivated you are, you'll decide to like maybe cut back here or there, or save money in other ways, or maybe cut out some services, or you'll find that you find things that you didn't realize you could even do. You'll also want to make sure that any extra money that comes in goes towards this debt of paying, goes towards this goal of paying down your debt. For example, maybe you got back a little bit more on a tax refund than you expected. Maybe you got a rebate on something you purchased, or maybe you got an unexpected bonus at work, who knows what. But any extra money that comes in, you're going to want to take that and put it towards your debt goal, because you want to get it gone as soon as you possibly can. You're also going to want to determine a debt payoff method that makes sense to you. Two of the most well-known methods, I think, are the snowball method and the avalanche method. So with the snowball method, you list your debts smallest to largest. You put any extra money that you have to your smallest debt, and then everything else you just make the minimum payments on. So all your focus is going towards that first debt that's the smallest balance. Once that one's paid off, you take whatever the minimum payment was on that debt, plus any extra money you have, plus whatever the minimum payment was on your next largest debt, and you make that payment, and you keep attacking that one until that one's done. And then you take all that money plus whatever you were paying on the next one, and you keep going that way until everything's gone. A lot of people like this method because it gives you momentum, because you see little things getting knocked off. Some people don't like it because they're more focused on interest expense and they don't want to pay any more interest expense than they have to. So for those people, they might prefer the avalanche method. So with the avalanche method, you list instead of listing your debts smallest to largest, you list it by the interest rate. So you attack the debt with the highest interest rate first, and then you go in order the same way. You put all your extra money to that debt with the highest interest, everything else you make minimum payments on, then when that one's gone, you move to the next one. So it's all about what makes sense to you and what you're comfortable with. But you do need some type of plan of attack on how you're going to get rid of your debt, so that you have a focus and you know what debt you're working on and where all that any extra money that you do have is going to go. You also need to make sure you commit to the plan. So you can't just kind of come up with a plan and then just kind of say, oh, well, we're just going to spend this extra money this week because it's been a rough week and we just really need a little extra, something to celebrate. If you're not going to commit to the plan, it's going to take you much longer. You'll see that if you commit, you will just find ways, you'll find extra funds in your budget because you'll get creative and you will be able to get out of debt sooner. I'm not saying it's going to be quick depending on the amount of debt you have, but it will go quicker if you really commit and you make sure you put every effort into getting rid of that debt. It has to really be a priority to you. And if you make it a priority, you'll see that you will find other ways to speed up the process. And when you do commit and you achieve goals, celebrate achieving those goals. You don't have to go out and spend money on a dinner. You don't have to do anything expensive, but you can just, just have like a little, like talk about it, acknowledge, tell the family, tell your spouse or whoever you're working on this with, this is so great. Look where we're at. You can celebrate without going out and spending a ton of money. You can even just go do something simple like, getting some snacks or just something simple, and just kind of acknowledging and celebrating those goals and then working towards the next one. So those are kind of like the general tips for getting out of debt. Honestly, it's really about the commitment. Of all the tips, I think the commitment is the most important part, because when you really focus on it you'll see how much progress you can make with little bits of funds here and there that you didn't even realize you had if you weren't paying attention so closely before. So then I wanted to talk about some tips for staying out of debt. So to me, I think the most important tip for staying out of debt is to try the best you can to change your mindset about debt. Because I think that so many of us were raised with this idea that everyone has debt, it's just part of life, that's just how we live. And by having that mindset, it can really almost kind of cause you to continue to live with debt, because any opportunity where something comes up and you could get something that you'd like to have and there's a payment plan, or you could put it on your credit card, you might just think, yeah, let's just do it. Who cares? We'll pay it off. That's what everyone does. That's just how it is. And that's going to put you right back in the same place that you were trying to get out of. So you really have to try and change that mindset and say, if I don't have the money for something, I'm going to wait and save up for it. I'm not going to just go, buy this new TV because they have 18 months of no interest and I can make payments on it. Even if you're not getting charged interest on something, it's still not a good idea, because now you have payments for the next 18 months that you might need that money if you have something else come up, like maybe an emergency happens, or who knows what might come up. You don't want to have future money dedicated to going towards debt payments, whether there's interest expense on it or not. So you want to really try and be prepared when situations come up, and take your time and think, and try and think of alternatives. Because especially when it's something like that, like I said, like a TV or something that's more like a luxury item, maybe your TV broke and you need a TV. I'm not saying, you have to live without a TV, but maybe you can find one on like a Facebook Marketplace, or someone selling one locally, or maybe you get the less expensive model and you wait so you could save up for a more expensive one that you can afford. You have to really think of the alternatives and do everything that you can to not use debt. And really consider when something breaks or needs to be replaced, if it's truly an emergency. If you don't have money for something, and say, like, for example, your couch is like sagging in, like one of mine is, and like the bottom support parts are like going. And it's like, yeah, we definitely need a new couch. Some people would just say, oh, this couch isn't perfect. We need a new couch. We're going to the furniture store. We don't have money for it. We're going to finance a new couch. Or you could say, well, yeah, it kind of stinks, but we just don't have the money for it. And we're fine at the end of the day. Everyone's happy and living, and the couch might sag in a little bit, but it's not something that I need to go into debt for. I'd rather wait and put it on a list of things that I need to save up for, and when we can save up for it, and there's not anything else more important, then we'll get that. But you really want to try and think before you go out and spend money if something is truly an emergency and if it's really worth going into debt for. Then I keep saying everything's the most important, but this is a really, really important step for staying out of debt, and that's to save up an emergency fund. So if you don't have an emergency fund, if you're in debt, you're only going to have you want to have a small emergency fund to start with, even if you have debt. You want to save that up first before you start focusing on paying off your debt, because you want to have a little bit of money to pull from if something comes up to prevent you from charging on a credit card. Because if you're paying off debt and then you keep charging little things on a credit card, you're just going to continue the cycle. So you want to have some type of a small emergency fund to deal with little things that are going to come up, because things always come up, and you're going to pull from that. But once you get out of debt, that's when you really want to focus on building up that emergency fund. Typically, they suggest like 3 to 6 months of expenses. I do have a separate episode on emergency fund, like tips on how to build that. And I definitely think I'm going to do another one again soon, because it's really important. But you want to build that emergency fund so that when these situations do come up, you have somewhere to pull the money from, and you're not forced to go into debt every time an emergency happens. And then once you use the money from the emergency fund, you devote your time to put the money back into the emergency fund rather than paying off a credit card and paying someone else interest and then having these monthly payments that you have to deal with. So that's a really important part of your overall long-term staying out of debt plan. Another tip for staying out of debt is to really stick to your shopping list when you go to a store. If you have a budget and you're trying to stick within a certain dollar amount, you really need to try to stick to that budget the absolute best you can when you go to the store by buying what was on your list and not falling into the trap of picking up other things that are on the shelf there to promote to you to try and get you to buy them because they're on sale, or who knows, they just look good. You think you really need this, but you didn't have it on your list, or you didn't need it before you got to the store. Those things can really blow your budget, and they can really add up. If you go to the grocery store and you were supposed to spend $150 and you spend, say, $175, and you do that 4 weeks, that's $100 that could have gone to debt. So it doesn't seem like a lot when it's happening, but it really does add up and it makes a big difference. So really try and challenge yourself to stick to your budget and leave the store with only what you went in there to buy. Okay, so my last tip for staying out of debt is to prepare a contingency plan. So look at your budget and decide what would happen if you had a financial emergency. Like, say, for example, you were out of work for a month or whatever. Where would you be able to cut? How would you be able to pay the bills? You really want to go through this in detail and have a plan. Like, what would get cut? All your dining out would get cut if you dine out at all. You would cut Netflix. You would cut cable. See if your cell phone could be downgraded. Like, really think of anything that you could possibly do to be able to continue your bills. This is obviously only preparation for a true emergency situation, but having this plan will keep you out of debt, but even more importantly, just in normal situations when you're not in an emergency situation, this will help reduce stress, knowing that you have a plan in place if something were to happen. You don't have to worry like, oh my gosh, I don't even know what we would do if I couldn't work for a month, or, you know, if the car breaks and we need to buy a new car. Like, you want to have a plan in place that, you know, if this happens, this is exactly what we're going to do, because it just will give you that peace of mind that you have a plan and you don't have to worry if something like that were to happen. So prepare a contingency plan. So that's it. That's all my tips for getting out of debt, staying out of debt. There's definitely more in both areas, but I didn't want to make this episode super long. I think it's already much longer than my typical episodes. I was considering, well, actually, it's really not too long, but I didn't want to make it super long. And I did at one point consider breaking apart one episode on getting out of debt and another episode on staying out of debt. So that I could maybe add some more tips in there. But I know I'm going to cover this topic in the future, so we'll cover other tips again, and I'll try and do different ones than we covered today. But I thought it was important to do them together because they really are so related. You really need to be putting the steps in place to get out of debt. To stay out of debt while you're getting out of debt, because that's what's going to keep you, it's going to keep your debt going down as you're paying it down, but it's also going to prevent you from adding more back to it. From your lifestyle choices. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to reach me for anything, you can reach me at facebook.com/LolasFrugalLife. You can post a comment to the page, send me a message there. I also have an email now, which is lolasfrugallife@gmail.com. There's no apostrophe in that. We also have a Facebook group if you'd like to join. It's facebook.com/groups/LolasFrugalLife. I check it every day, and I will admit you to the group as soon as I see your request. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you enjoy the show, if the platform that you listen on allows for ratings, I would really appreciate if you wouldn't mind doing that. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a really awesome day.